talking about key packaging decisions for craft brewers for the next 30 minutes, a little bit about the North Carolina craft beer environment right now as well, and just sort of what Fullsteam's been up to over the last year. But before I get started, if you guys have any questions for Sean, feel free to tweet, text, or email them to me, and I'll get them up here. You can tweet using the hashtag BrewTalks. You can email using ask@brewbound.com. And if you guys want to text, it's 650-BREW411. So I'll get all those questions up here, a variety of ways to send this guy your most pressing questions.
Are you faxing as well?
Yeah,
can they send a fax?
Yes, they can. There's carrier pigeons outside. Send them in. So Sean, why don't we just kind of jump right into it, and let's talk a little bit about the Fullsteam business to start, just so everyone has an idea of kind of what you've been up to, and kind of how you got started in 2010 initially, and kind of how things have progressed over the last few years.
Sure, yeah, so we opened in August of 2010, and our business model was always to be a tavern with a production brewery component to it. Our tavern has been very successful. It accounted for 80% of all revenue in 2012, and 70% this year, in 2013. So it's obviously been the vast majority of our revenue, and that, given our capacity constraints, has forced us to stay somewhat small in terms of our distribution footprint. So we self-distribute throughout the Triangle, and we work with Tryon. Brad Johnson is here. Thanks for all your great work for us and our other craft brewers in non-Triangle areas, throughout the rest of North Carolina. And then we do a little bit of business in Charleston, South Carolina. So we've grown steadily, but not crazy.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about your decision to enter the market the way you did. Not necessarily draft only, but very heavily focused on draft, very heavily focused on taproom sales, over your own bar. Why did you kind of make that conscious choice to start out that way?
Now, the two main reasons come to mind. One is we knew we didn't have a huge system, so there was only so much that we could do. And obviously, just from a margin standpoint, being honest, it's better to, if you can only produce so much beer, it's better to maximize your opportunity where the margins are best, and that's on site at your own facility. North Carolina, as we all know, is amazing in that sense that we can have our own tap room and also distribute out our beer. So again, with constraints on how much we could produce, we emphasized creating a great experience here and maximizing the opportunity that we have on site. I said there was two reasons, and I'm thinking about the other one. Oh, the other one is I don't know, we're doing different things here by intentionally focusing on what it means to be a southern brewery and using a lot of local ingredients, and that takes time. I feel like this is a great R&D environment for us, that we get to test things and test new beers and really hone in what we're doing before we commit to packaging. We don't want to package something and have it change. Once it's in that form, once it's in a 12-ounce can or 16-ounce can or a bomber or something, you want to limit its variability. And frankly, it's taken us a little bit of time to dial things in. I think if we rushed into packaging, we would have had way too much variance in our product that we can control more on-site, explain more from our customer base, that direct relationship from bartender to tavern patron, from us walking around and talking about it, right, versus when it's out in the marketplace and you have less control.
So getting a lot of immediate feedback and response from the customers that are actually enjoying it as fresh as possible in the way that you intended it.
Yes, or the way we need to tweak it based on their feedback. Yeah.
And
especially for things like a sweet potato lager that require some finessing with our system. It's hard to brew with sweet potatoes, and so kind of trying to improve efficiencies at the same time while maintaining the vision for what we want from this beer, and that's taken 3 years.
Right. So in many ways, your initial business model sort of helped shape a lot of the beers that you guys are creating in the way that they exist, today, 3.5, 4 years later. But now you've sort of taken that next step and decided to invest in additional capacity, which allowed you guys to purchase a small bottling unit and also to do some mobile canning. So you're sort of evolving as a business as well. Walk me through that change a little bit and kind of how you guys have changed your approach now, just as a business.
Well, we've increased our capacity somewhat to where we feel like we can add that layer in and not take away from our own business and then the existing draft business. It hasn't always worked out, as none of us, we all know that when you introduce something, there's going to be those that disruptive kind of process, and it's not always been easy. But we have worked hard to maintain servicing our existing customers as best as we possibly can, and then layering in a new element on top of it. So we've gone kind of cautiously with the Maheen. We have a 6-head Maheen filler and a labeler. It does about 60 bottles per minute. It's nice. It's good speed, and it kind of fits our overall kind of rhythm, And then we worked with, as you mentioned, the Old Dominion mobile canning, and we have them come in about once every 3 weeks or so, and they're packaging about 40 barrels for us at a time. And we're going through that. They're like very quickly, but we're trying to pace it, work with our customers. Thankfully, we have very patient wholesalers and our own customers that we service who understand that we're taking that measured approach to make sure that we're not pissing people off. Because frankly, we did that early on. I mean, who didn't, right? Maybe you're like, I didn't, but I know we did. We definitely did. To where there are still some accounts that I'm hesitant to go back to because I still feel like I'd screw it up and run out of beer for them. And part of the challenge too, I'll tell you what, this is another layer of kind of complexity here. And I'm looking around thinking, there's a fair amount of you who probably face this similar thing, and that's the on-premise experience is a double-edged sword in that it's a great source of revenue, but at the same time, to keep people coming back, what do you need? Variety, right? You need to keep it interesting. What does variety introduce? Variety introduces dissonance and it inhibits scalability, right? So there's times where I look at Lone Rider, it hones in and just nails those styles and builds them up, and it's like, man, if we weren't so,
reliant,
but it's like at the same time, it's Paul and I were talking earlier. There's like 1,000 ways to skin a cat here, and so for us, and our desire to kind of have a community center and to do creative things and quirky stuff and all that, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the fact that we have to bring in that variety, which introduces the dissonance, which keeps us, it makes scaling up more challenging. And when we do go, we try with we're going just with Kakalaki. The next challenge for us, and I know I'm rambling, is
we got plenty of time, so
is how. This is a collaboration. It's not one of our core beers, but the next round of canning that we want to do is like a set of 3 beers. It's we call it the American Progress series of like classic American beers: El Toro, Cream Ale, Rocket Science IPA, and Fullsteam. And I want to do them all 3 together because they belong as a set. But how do we do that? How do we get there? Because that's a lot to introduce. Because I think we all know it's probably going to work. It's probably going to have some measure of success. And knowing when to time it, that's kind of our upcoming challenge for 2014, maybe 2015.
Interesting. So taking just a step back, and
was that really interesting? Because I always fear that when people say interesting, this is like a thing of mine. When people say interesting, they're like, oh my God, shut up already.
No, actually, introducing 3 beers at once, which I do want to get back to, is sort of interesting in the fact that you guys don't have a canning line here. So figuring out just how to overcome that hurdle of, okay, we've only got so many tanks, we can only brew so many beers at a time, and how do we can them all at once? So, it looks on a retail shelf set like you have that billboard effect, which would be awesome for you guys.
Yeah.
But
if we can support it, exactly.
And if you guys can execute on it. But just taking a step back and thinking about the way you guys have approached your packaging considerations to start, I mean, how did you guys select 22-ounce bombers for some of your offerings? Why did you guys think about cans? Walk me through some of the decision-making process as you guys started to evolve.
You bet. Fundamentally, we're packaging agnostic. I believe that that beer belongs in many different vessels, and if you can do it, there's different beers belong in different vessels. So we've toyed around with 750s, with 22s, and now with cans. Originally, in my business plan, I remember writing anything but the glass six-pack. That was just kind of my mantra. And as I look at where the opportunity is, I think about, and I've had conversations with wholesalers. They're like, there's a reason there's the glass six-pack. People want it, and so there's that interplay between being novel and interesting and standing out from the crowd versus what customers really want. A friend of mine owns a distillery in Charleston, South Carolina, and prior to that, he had a cookie company that was bought by General Mills, very successful cookie company, and he really emphasized, for Kakalaki, he really emphasized simplicity, and because I was like thinking about 16-ounce cans, and I know there's 16-ounce cans, like I think Noda for their hop, drop, and roll and their jam session, 16-ounce cans is a great way to go. I mean, it just works. For Kakalaki and kind of where I think that beer is going, and my friend Scott reminded me, he's like, just keep it simple. I don't like koozies. I'm not a koozie guy, but he got me with that, like, you want people to be able to know that it fits into a koozie, because that's that beer. That's kind of what that beer needs and deserves, and maybe its audience. The 22-ounce bombers, that's because those are seasonal beers, and like a lot of folks around here, you want to differentiate your packaging and have something that stands out a little bit more and gets known as, a seasonal product.
So, two questions. How much does brand image or the image of a brand that you want to reflect inform your decision-making process? And then, does a good craft brewery have a diverse mix of packages?
Well, that second one, I think that's just the philosophy. I mean, Oscar Blues is a great example of a company that's stuck with their can as their brand. The can is the brand for Oscar Blues.
But they've still mixed it up with a 19.2-ounce can and a 12-ounce can and different sizes at least.
Yeah, sure. But to me, I think they're a canning brew. There's no way around it, and that's really working for them. But some point that might constrain them. I don't know. It hasn't so far, right? So I think for us it works to be packaging agnostic, just because like our beers are so, we're just so diverse in what we're trying to do. And we may rein that in. We may eliminate certain things. I mean, I think that's the next wave for us as breweries is what do we let die off? As the store shelves get more and more crowded, we're gonna have to make those smart choices. I know of a brewery that led with 5 SKUs of year-round beers, and they were told, hone it into 3. That's what the market really wants. That's all they can focus on. There's that whole SKU fatigue and all that. So I picked on that one, but what was the first part?
Which we'll talk about later, by the way.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I'm excited as we introduce our products into the market.
The second or the first question
yeah.
was really just how much do you let brand image inform your packaging decisions?
What do you mean by inform?
Just kind of where you're going to go with it. I mean, what styles you put into what bottles or cans, bombers versus 16-ounce versus 12-ounce. I mean, how much you were talking about the Kakalaki really fitting into a 12-ounce can. So okay. What does the sort of brand image or just the style say about the package that it should be in? Okay,
this is just for us, but I will say I have this philosophy about beers for conversation and beers for introspection. All right, so what does that mean? Beers for conversation. Even Chris is looking at me like, what do you mean by that? Beers for conversation are like beers that kind of sit in the background and they're like, they're easy drinking. It's like this beer. Like I'm drinking Kakalaki right now because it's like just comfortable and it's like it's there for a refresher and a little reminder, but the focus is on the conversation, right? So we have a lot of those beers where we want to step back a little bit and let the moment kind of take precedence, and beer supplements it. Like, I'm comfortable with that, right? So those, to me, are like your 12-ounce cans or bottles, just something simple.
Flagships?
I guess, or key beers, but be a part of a series. For us, it's it's Kakalaki and the American Progress series once that rolls out. And then beers for introspection are like our bottled beers, the bombers. They're beers that are like you and the beer, where you're like pouring it and you're like, wow, what is that? What are persimmons?
Right.
How does that coffee balance with the pecan, in our Farrington winter? So it's a little bit more, I call it a little bit more selfish. I don't think that's a bad thing, but it's a little bit more, focused on the table. We talk a lot at Fullsteam about, this is a kind of a branding thing, but we talk a lot about our sense of place. And so the sense of place for like our 12-ounce can in singular in Kakalaki, and hopefully down the road with our American Progress series, that sense of place is the backyard, or the front porch, or hanging out with friends. The sense of place for our 22-ounce is the dinner table.
Right.
And then like when we, hopefully, maybe in 2015, we can build on that sense of place and really expand our kind of our barrel age program and the Forager series, where we collect ingredients from the community and we kind of go into the field and farms and all that, and I kind of call that the sense of place of like into the wild.
So how do you convey that sense of place message to the consumer so they know sort of what occasions they should be consuming these different products?
Well, price and packaging. I mean, that's the key. If you have a reasonable price, it's hard to convey the sense of place of into the wild if you're if you're selling a can that's $9.99, a 6-pack. But it's a lot easier to do that of like, pick it up, make it easy, grab and go. If it's a $9.99, it sends those cues. I mean, customers are smart. They'll select it for you.
Right.
And then just the product itself and kind of the esoteric or straightforward ingredients like the American Progress. We got a lot of. I kind of heard a lot of feedback, either directly or indirectly, that Fullsteam, they make a lot of weird ass beers. Well, I guess we do, but like our flagship beer is a steam beer. It's our El Toro Cream Ale, even though it's 98% local using North Carolina 6-row barley and corn, it's our beer. It's just a simple beer. The American IPA is just an American IPA. So those are cues that the customer picks up on. Especially that combined with price and the packaging that it's in, and they say, oh yeah, I'm going to grab this, and we're going to, I don't know, hit the golf course or something like that.
So price and style then kind of in some ways determine what package you're going to be in.
Yeah, and of course cost of goods.
Okay.
As we analyze how expensive certain things are.
So walk me through sort of the cost of goods aspect. I mean, when you guys are thinking about what beers fit in what package, I mean, what are you taking into account? The actual bottles, the cartons, the label design, the actual ingredients to brew? I mean, walk me through the sort of steps there.
You bet. So we do our cost of goods analysis, which is obviously focused on the raw materials and the components to put things together, be it the anything from the grain bill to the hops to the unusual ingredients to the bottle itself and the labor. So the label, not the labor. That's not part of our cost of goods. Well, what I did last year was actually pretty interesting. We took our beers and did an analysis. It wasn't a weighted average, but it was just a straight 25% analysis. So we had 4 components that we looked at. One was cost of goods. 2 was how hard it was to brew in the brew house, just on the hot side. 3 was fermentation time, and 4 was popularity. And so we basically ranked our beers just in a simple kind of take each one and rank it where it sits, and then just looked at where our beers sit. And the challenging thing for us, one of the challenging things, it's the beer industry, there's a lot of challenging things, but we have a fair amount of, tweeners. I had a boss one time that said the hardest people to manage are the tweeners, the people who are in between being awful, so you fire them, and being great, so you promote them.
Right.
And I haven't thought of this before, but the
Probably
hardest
why
thing
I've never got a promotion, by the way.
awkward. But I'm realizing here that the hardest thing to deal with is our own tweeners, where we have these, they're not great. I mean, they taste great. They always taste great. We wouldn't serve them if they didn't taste great, but there's challenges about them. They either, like Carver, the sweet potato lager, we can only brew that once a day in our combi unit system right now. It's
Right.
it's hard. The lauter time is impossibly long. That notches it down on the list. And also, it's not our top mover. What's our top mover? It's IPA, because people love IPAs. Yay.
So have there been beers
kinda,
that you've scrapped then from a package because it just didn't make sense financially for you to put it into a bottle or a can?
I think we've moved so deliberately and cautiously that we've only done things in packages that we know that we're, at least right now, going to be able to support. Am I missing anything? I mean, we've done some one-offs like sparkling pear and all that, but like I think for the most part we're so deliberate and not in like we really have it figured out, but I'm oddly cautious.
Right.
So I don't think we've scrapped anything yet. But if we were to run with like my plan, the business plan, that I had written out a couple of years ago, we would be in that like, ooh, what do we need to scrap now? I'm glad we're not at that. I'm glad we haven't advanced so far that where we have to be like cutting back.
So find it really interesting that you've actually taken some time to rank sort of the profitability and what beers make the most sense for you guys to package and kind of where they rank just in terms of sales and everything else. How important is that in the sort of decision-making process, and how important is it for startups to do that, at their own breweries, to sit back and say, yeah, we really like making this beer, but it might not make the most sense for us to make it all the time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think you and I were talking earlier about Sam Adams and kind of their decision-making process. They're so committed to exploring that West Coast style IPA because they know it's where the market is. That if you read between the lines on their industry report, they're not making much money from it, right? But
it's actually hurting margins.
Right.
Yeah.
They openly say that. I mean, it's still profitable, but it's hurting their
overall
run rate. Yeah. So, but they make that. We're very similar in that sense. We make those decisions to be like, and a lot of us do that, right? Where we're like, we know we're not going to make that much money from it, but it's a good story. It advances. It's like Hogwash, our hickory smoked porter. We get a lot of traction from that. It's been in Food and Wine, and it's people write about it and like kind of it's chatter.
Buzz.
It's BuzzFeed, right?
Yeah.
But it's 1% of our sales. It's like at the tavern, and just in general, it's probably less than that. There's times where I'm like, why are we doing this? Because like we could be doing something else that I know would churn, but it's part of our narrative. So we make those decisions where it advances the overall narrative of who Fullsteam is because it's so interesting and novel or somewhat. It's not revolutionary. I understand. It's a hickory smoked porter,
Right.
But it gets enough buzz for us that it's worth maintaining. The other thing too that I'll say is because our niche is Southern style beer using local ingredients, we also make a very similar kind of analysis or decision to pursue those beers that aren't particularly profitable for us because one, we believe in making those choices, supporting the farmers and investing in a beer with a higher cost of goods where the margin is nil. El Toro is a great example of that. I mean, talk about a challenge right there. Like if there was like an MBA class, they'd be like, like a consulting group, they'd probably have a lot of fun with that as a topic. It's a cream ale. It's done well for us just in terms of like, Chris makes a great cream ale. It's delicious. It uses North Carolina 6-row barley and corn. That comes in at probably, 80% more. We're paying a hefty premium for that barley. And think about it, it's a cream ale. it's not going to get the beer geeks excited. It's one of our lower rated beers on Beer Advocate because it's just, it's boring, right, in that sense.
I'm a fan of boring beers. That's why I'm
delicious.
drinking it right now. So.
No, God
great,
bless you. Awesome, thank you. But it's delicious and it's great.
Someone's got to do it, right? Yeah.
No, but it's and like, so the decision as we go into packaging, this is very real. Like, okay, so the cost of goods are pretty high on that. We know it's not going to be beer geek fodder because it's a easy drinking sessionable beer. And I know the beer geeks are going to be like, session beers, yay, but they're also going to be like 3, which is fine. I love you.
Yeah.
But because it's expensive, and we don't make much money from it, but it advances our story. It's all that kind of interplay of like, where do you go with that? Like, how far do you take it? And can we afford to take a chance on that as we scale something up? You want to make choices, smart choices in what you start scaling, and really look at those cost of goods. And I'll say one other thing real quick on that. Supplement it if you can with things that are well received, that are surprisingly profitable for you. So straight up, like our summer basil farmhouse ale isn't that expensive to make. Farmhouse ales, they churn pretty quickly, it ferments out pretty quickly, the cost of goods is reasonable, and we make decent money from it. We're not layering like tons of profit on it, but we don't do straight line cost accounting by any stretch of the imagination. We charge what we believe the market will bear, and so that's why our El Toro is lower, $15 lower at a keg price than say the summer basil, and then a lot lower than some of the seasonals and all of that.
And the farmhouse beers are actually pretty popular right now.
Yeah.
So.
Right. So popularity, ours is unique in the sense that it's the basil. It's not for everybody, but it's for a lot of people because it does really well for us. So we supplement our vision to build what we call a Southern beer economy, in this quest to buy local and ultimately, hopefully, drive down through our dedication, drive down the cost of North Carolina 6-row barley by committing to it, and hopefully other people will come on, other brewers will come on, and then in the long run, that'll start coming down to a price that's, I wouldn't say more reasonable, but more price competitive. But we're willing to make that sacrifice because that's our story.
Right. So it definitely seems like you walk a pretty fine line between sort of that back end cost analysis, cost of goods approach, and this sort of brand image. What do you want your story to be? Talk to me a little bit about just kind of how difficult it is to come in and make these decisions on a day-to-day basis when you're walking that tight of a line. Or maybe it's not difficult, I don't know. Maybe you just go with your gut.
I don't know. It's not that hard. It's just, I think it's really not that hard. I don't sweat about it. I feel like over time, and this is the gut side or the emotional side of me. It's like I just feel like over time we're going to figure it out. We're going to get equipment that's more efficient, and it'll work out. It's not always going to be easy, but right. I feel like our product mix is smart. Our beers are dialed in, and we make those informed choices the right way. And I ultimately trust that if we continue to make delicious beer, that the customer will support our vision if it's smart. Like we can't go out with a $13.99 El Toro cream ale. But we trust that there's enough that we have the right balance and we can figure it out to make that sacrifice, and that people will get it and care about what we're doing enough to support us and understand that there's that give and take. I hope I'm answering the question the right way.
Yeah, no, I think what I'm sort of hearing is that you're willing to take a little bit of a hit up front on a beer like El Toro to sort of contribute to the overall brand image of Fullsteam and what you're all about.
Yes.
And hopefully down the road, that leads to something greater?
Yes, definitely. And I think that path is harder because it's such a classic beer. I think there's breweries that smartly go about doing the same analysis, losing money on a beer that's incredibly complex. The cost of goods is really high, the storage cost is really high, it's barrel aged, it's this and that, and the opportunity cost to brew something that churned a lot faster is great, but their narrative is more on the complex side of things, where they get the they get the beer geeks fired up, it gets recognized as sought after and all that. That's a great approach as well.
Right, and it must be. I mean, that's obviously, it's tough to get that sort of the beer geeks fired up and to get that cachet, and to also sort of look at it on the backside of pricing and being able to charge a premium for a beer that might take longer. I mean, have you had that experience of having a beer that instinctively should be at a premium, ultra luxury premium price point because of the time and the work and the effort and the cost of goods that you've put into it, but just doesn't quite have the brand recognition yet?
No, we're fortunate in that sense. Is that the wrong answer? No,
I saw some barrels back there, so.
No, I mean, I think the challenge hasn't been in I think we've done an all right job of pricing appropriately, and when it's on the high end, we hear that customers say, yeah, I get it, it uses, forage persimmons, or, I understand, and we occasionally hear, there have been some occasions where I've heard, like, damn, that was really expensive, but not that often.
But it's always been worth it, hopefully.
Hopefully. That's obviously for the consumer to decide. I think we're right at the cusp of being too expensive for what we provide, and we have to be really cautious of that, especially as there are more and more breweries coming out. Wow, it's going to be fascinating. The pressure for competitive pricing. It freaks me out a little bit. So I think the way we combat that is a narrative that resonates, has an emotional resonance with consumers, and they care, they want to support. Not in a manipulative way, in a true, honest, like, I love that about what, that their beer is that, or that it does that. I think more the challenging thing isn't exactly the cost from the consumer standpoint, but just that we're still learning on barrel aging and handling product, and we've had challenges and bumps in the road to where we haven't been able to package something up, or where we've had some we've had one blunder in there in particular where it's just been like a little bit of a it's just been anxious for us. The margin for error is extremely narrow right now, so it's tough.
Right. That was actually a good segue for one of my final questions, which is, how much do you let the sort of retail environment, you said the competitive landscape going forward with so many, craft brewers out there, so many different SKUs. I think there's something like 600 new SKUs on average every year from craft brewers. How much do you let that inform your decision making? And, maybe more specifically, just to sort of localize it, in North Carolina specifically, obviously you have a pretty good grasp on the environment here and the retail landscape here. How much do you let that inform what you're doing inside the Fullsteam brewery?
Well, from just a costing standpoint, I'm very aware of it. I think there's those sweet spots that we have to be, it'd be cavalier of us to say, oh, we don't pay attention to that. It'd be silly. In this environment, where we're headed, it'd be silly to try to, to pretend that you ignore that. I mean, I'm looking around at the existing breweries here, and I think we're all, and we're just getting started. So the more experienced ones, I think, are very sensitive, very aware of that sweet spot and that smart pricing. So we're no different. We're just newer at it, and I think that makes us even kind of more anxious about it. In terms of introducing and how we roll out, I think, again, the margin for error is rapidly shrinking, so I'm okay with our pace. I mentioned to you, I think earlier, that our path to growth is to be I call it a nimble tortoise. You know, we don't want to be the hare. We want to be a nimble tortoise. We don't want to be a tortoise. It's just not a good time to be a tortoise in the craft beer world, like in the classic story, and we don't want to be the hare. It's okay that if a brewery comes along and is that hare and just boom, you know, great. That's, you know, again, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. For us, for what works, for my planned path for where I want to take this, I want Fullsteam to be a landmark brewery for the South. It's a nimble tortoise process to get there, to where we're thinking smartly, making informed decisions, adapting if necessary, but on that pace to where we're growing comfortably. And I think, you know, you see that with a single SKU rollout of a can, and me going, what do we do with, you know, with that? How do we manage that for when we want to introduce our core beer lineup? So hopefully when we get together again, you know, maybe revisit in a year, I'll have better insights on it. But I think a lot about where we're headed on that, instead of just, oh, we'll figure it out.
Right, right. Well, Sean, I really appreciate the time up here. I know that you guys do a fair amount of business over your bar, so why don't we break for about 10 minutes, go fill up our pints at your bar, and then come back for the second half of our discussion. Thank you.
Thanks all. Appreciate it.